Are body weight and metabolic health one and the same? Absolutely not. My name is Sippy Livnay. I'm a registered nurse and a certified food addiction counselor. And welcome to my weekly live every Sunday, 2 p.m. Israel time. Figure that out for your country if you're not listening from Israel. And today I want to discuss something that I am really thinking about a lot because I am reading Dr. Robert Lustig's latest book called Metabolical. If there is one book that you want to read about nutrition and metabolic health and like how to eat healthy, this is the one. I know me. Thank you so much for being here. I love seeing you on my weekly lives. So one of the things that Dr. Lustig talks about, and I think that people really have lost sight of, is that how much you weigh and how healthy you are metabolically are not one and the same. There is a connection between them. And definitely, statistically speaking, if you are overweight or obese, your chances of having metabolic problems or metabolic dysfunction, or what's called metabolic syndrome, are much, much higher than people who are not overweight, who are at a normal weight. But that doesn't mean that every fat person is metabolically ill and every thin person is metabolically healthy. It really, really doesn't mean that. As a matter of fact, Dr. Lustig quotes a research that has been done that shows that 88% of the population in the US has some kind of metabolic dysfunction or problem. So let's talk about what does that mean, metabolic health. What is metabolism? What is metabolic syndrome? Metabolism is basically the way that our body takes the food that we eat or the materials that we ingest and uses it for functioning, for making our body function. Our body functions are basically two things. One is burning those materials for energy, and the other thing is for building cells, building the things that make up our cells, building the things that we need to make our body function, and also getting rid of the garbage that accumulates from cells dying or materials, the building of materials, and also, the materials coming apart. And how do we get them out of our bodies in a healthy way that doesn't damage us? So, metabolic syndrome basically means that some of these processes in the body are not functioning properly. So, how does a metabolic dysfunction could be high blood pressure, and somebody who has high blood pressure has a risk of getting a stroke or congestive heart disease or harming the heart. It could be diabetes. So somebody who has insulin resistance or pre-diabetic or has diabetes has a risk of all the complications of diabetes, whether, God forbid, it's blindness, kidney function, heart disease, stroke. A lot of things can go wrong with diabetes. Then you have the things like fatty liver disease, which can lead to liver transplant. Your liver is basically at the front line of metabolism. It is basically the first organ in our body that meets up with the food after our gut, after our digestive system, and starts really breaking it down even further into those building blocks or energy or whatever our body needs. So if fat is accumulating in the liver, that is a problem, because then the liver can't function properly. And that is one of the leading problems now for liver transplant. So this is something that was only seen in alcoholics until about 50 years ago or 40 years ago, when sugar started becoming so inherent in our food. And also processed food has become the main food supply, the main thing that we eat. Then you have, for example, thyroid is also part of how we metabolize, our food, part of our metabolism. So what is very, very important to understand is there are people who are overweight and even obese who are don't have metabolic dysfunction. And there are many people who are thin and have really good figures and they're really good looking. They have beautiful clothes and their clothes fit are small sizes and whatever it is. And metabolically, they are ill. They have dysfunction. And these are people who run the risk of spending their later years of retirement, instead of doing all the things they always dreamed to do when they finished working and retired, going from doctor to doctor and checkup to checkup and medication to medication and test to test. So metabolic health is so much more important than how much you weigh. And the fat that causes metabolic disease is not necessarily the fat that puts you in a size 46 or a size 38. It's the fat that accumulates around the internal organs. It doesn't have to be that much. And it is also not just a matter of how fat you are on the outside, but how fat you are on the inside, and what you are eating, and how your body is using those foods, is taking advantage of what you are eating. So this is why a lot of times I teach my clients who come to my program, GPS to Sugar Free, to separate those two entities of losing weight and being metabolically healthy, because a lot of times the weight loss will come gradually. Sometimes it won't come right away. It depends on the genetics of the person. It depends on what that person's mother ate before it. By the way, all metabolic health does too. But, a lot of times weight loss won't happen, just because of course, somebody who starves themselves and eats 500 calories a day is going to lose weight quickly. Will they be metabolically healthy? Really, really not necessarily. But people who want to put their metabolic health first have to sort of take the idea of weight loss and put it for a minute, let it go naturally as a result of the process of eating in a way that's metabolically healthy. So sometimes that will mean that the weight won't come off right away, but they will see that that fat, that abdominal fat, that is really what causes metabolic syndrome under the chest area here, starts becoming smaller. I always teach my clients to measure their circumference, their waist circumference, their hip circumference, and their neck circumference. And many times, I had one woman, for example, who after 2 months of the GPS to Sugar Free workshop, she only lost 2 kilos. She was so disappointed, but she had lost 7 centimeters on her abdominal circumference. And I said to her, what would you prefer? Would you prefer 7 kilo and 2 centimeters on your stomach? Or is it better, which is better? Or is it better to lose 2 kilo, maybe on the scale, but lose 7 centimeters on your abdominal circumference? And of course, the second is so, so much important. But nobody thinks about that. All the people only think about the number that they see on the scale. What makes you metabolically healthy is not how much you eat, but the foods that you choose and what those foods do to you. And that the food industry does not tell us. There's a lot of manipulations and things that the food industry can do to the food that we eat, especially the processed foods, that they by law do not have to divulge that information to us. I'm going to give you guys a great example, because basically the most toxic food to metabolic health is not necessarily the highest calorie food, it's the sugar. And fat is higher calorie, but it's especially if it comes from a healthy source, that is not toxic to metabolic health, unless you're eating gallons and gallons of it, or kilos and kilos of it. But if you're eating, don't be afraid of the fat that comes naturally in food, like in dairy and chicken and fish, but be afraid of the sugar that comes in any kind of thing that comes in a package. I'll give you for you guys a fantastic example. I once went to visit a winery. Was part of, like, we had this fun day from work and we went to visit a winery and got a tour at a winery. And during the tour of the winery, she started talking about the production of grape juice. Now, if you are not Jewish and you're watching this video, grape juice is a really important part of Jewish tradition because many times there's a blessing over wine and you can use grape juice instead of wine. And so basically every kosher winery usually will also produce grape juice, and it'll say on it 100% grapes, pure grape juice. But did you know that the wineries can add grape sugar to grape juice to make it sweeter? And they don't have to tell you about that because they are adding the sugar that comes naturally in the grapes. So if they add grape sugar to grape juice, they can still call it 100% grapes. They don't have to put it on the label. It just says, you know, when the ingredients, it says grapes. It doesn't say grapes and grape sugar. But people who are drinking this grape juice are drinking more sugar than they would if it was just really just plain squeezed from grapes. And of course, even grape juice is not amazing. There's no fiber in it. It's just sugar. But here you're getting even more and you don't even know about it. Another thing is, for example, they can put things like lactose, the milk sugar, in milk products to make them sweeter. And they say that it has no added sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and everybody's drinking this chocolate milk that's sweet, like chocolate milk, but they're really getting more sugar. And they think that they're not having sugar. People think that date sugar is not sugar, that honey is not sugar because it's natural. And all these things, when it comes to metabolic health, when it comes to how our body uses or ingests or you know, how does it deal with these foods? It's sugar in every single way, and it taxes the liver, and it makes us have all these metabolic diseases. Exactly, you know, if you eat date honey, it's the exact same thing as eating table sugar as far as it, you know, as far as the metabolic health is concerned. So my main message to you, which is always the main message, is eat real food. When you eat food that doesn't need a label, you eat the food that's at the, you know, at the sides and the back of the supermarket, the foods, you know, that you don't have to look at the ingredients to know what you're eating. You can actually see it and you know what you're having. Fruits, vegetables in their natural form, fish, eggs, meat, chicken, and you in their most natural form. And it's not a question of how many calories it is or how much you're eating, but what they have done to that. So eat food in its most natural state that you can, and that includes grains or legumes. There's a real difference between eating a cup of chickpeas, you know, a whole cup of chickpeas, than eating chickpea bread that's been made out of chickpea flour. It is not the same thing. This is chickpeas and this is chickpeas. That it is not metabolized in the same way at all. So Nomi asks, if I have a choice, should I drink a quarter of a cup of wine or a quarter of a cup of grapefruit juice for ritual purposes? That's a fantastic question that a lot of clients ask me. For example, if somebody wants to take just a little bit, because there is a matter of dose dependence here, which means the amount that you ingest really does matter when it comes to sugar, for example. And maybe somebody can handle from the addiction side of it, because what's the problem with these foods is they're addictive. Sugar is addictive, just like cigarettes and alcohol and smoking, and drugs. And for some people, I know many people have been addicted to alcohol and drugs and sugar, and they all said hands down that recovery from their sugar addiction was the hardest one. So, but let's say somebody knows that they can take a small sip of like the kiddush wine or grape juice, which is better. So here's the answer. It depends. From a sugar ingestion metabolic point of view, dry red wine is the best. And of course, to drink as little as possible. But if there's some people who, for them, I always say that the addiction comes before the health. So if somebody feels like wine has more of an addictive pull on them, but grape juice like little sip of grape juice won't do anything for them. So then take the little sip of grape juice and not the wine. If you don't like wine and you love grape juice, then obviously it would be much better to take a small sip of dry red wine. So that, I hope, answers your question, Nomi. And there are a lot of people who are addicted to sugar who just decide not to take a sip at all. From a halachic point of view, it's not the same as like the blessing over the bread, where there you have to, it's eating the bread is part of taking part of the blessing, but you can actually be yotze, like take part of the blessing over the kiddush, over the wine and the grape juice, even if you don't take a sip, unless you're the only one, you're by yourself and you're making kiddush for yourself. So I would definitely tell people to think about if they really need to take a sip of that wine or grape juice or not. It's something also that can be discussed with your rabbi, but definitely I would say it's also a personal thing. Just like, look at it from a really from an honest point of view and think about which of those would have a more of a pull on you and leave you like hungry for more. And if it's both, then I would say definitely think about giving both of them up. But if one of them you can take just a little sip to be, then do it. But be vigilant and be careful. So that's what I would say for you, Nomi, and for anyone else listening. So if you're listening to the recording of this video on my Facebook page, GPS to Sugar Free Tzipilivne, please like it, share it, and give your comments below. What do you think about metabolic health versus body weight? And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, well, why don't you like this video and subscribe to my channel, because then every time that a new live comes up, you will get notified for it. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a great day and a great week. And I will be back on my Facebook page live next week on Sunday and my weekly live at 2 p.m. Israel time. And you can watch the recording on my page or on my YouTube channel. Love you guys. Have a great week. Bye.